The corporate gala was supposed to be my wife's moment of triumph. Instead, it became the night I decided to destroy her world. I stood at the bar, nursing my third whiskey, watching Kiera move through the room as if it belonged to her. In her black cocktail dress and striking heels, she drew the attention of every executive in Austin's tech scene. My wife had always been ambitious, but lately, her hunger for success had taken on a sharper edge. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mason Reddan's voice boomed across the ballroom. The CEO of TechNova Solutions raised his glass, his perfectly veneered smile gleaming under the chandeliers. "I'd like to toast our rising star, Kiera Merren." Applause rippled through the crowd. I clapped too, like the dutiful husband I was supposed to be. "Kiera's dedication to our company has been extraordinary," Mason continued, his eyes lingering on my wife in a way that made my stomach turn, especially during these past few months while her husband recovered from his little surgery. Laughter. Actual laughter from these people who barely knew me. "Good thing she has a work husband to keep her company," Mason added with a wink. More laughter. Kiera's smile widened, and she raised her glass toward Mason. "Here's to working late nights with the best boss in Austin." If only humiliation burned calories, I'd be a marathon runner by now. I'd spent the last 6 months recovering from a torn ACL that required surgery. 6 months of physical therapy, of being dependent on others, of watching my wife grow more distant every day. What I hadn't realized was that she'd been filling that distance with Mason Reddan. "Keaton barely notices me at night anymore," Kiera said loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "He's usually passed out by 9. The crowd chuckled. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Sandra, Kiera's sister, leaned over from the next table. "Honestly, Keaton, you should be grateful Kiera has someone who appreciates her drive." "Absolutely," chimed in Zara Meller, the HR manager who'd been gunning for Kiera's position for years. "Some men just can't handle ambitious women." I set down my glass and stood up. Every eye in our section turned toward me. Kiera's expression shifted from amusement to concern, probably worried I'd make a scene. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Some men can't handle ambitious women, but some women can't handle faithful husbands either." The laughter died. Mason's smile faltered for just a second. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted messaging app I'd been using for months. My fingers moved quickly across the screen, sending a single message. Phase 1 initiated. "Excuse me," I said to the table. "I need some fresh air." As I walked away, I heard Kiera's nervous laugh. "Sorry about that. He's still adjusting to his medication." Outside the hotel, I lit a cigarette and waited. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen, my old army buddy who now worked private security. "Package delivered. Check your email in 10 minutes. I smiled for the first time all evening. 3 months of planning were about to pay off. See, while everyone thought I was wallowing in self-pity during my recovery, I'd actually been quite productive. Cybersecurity consulting has its perks, especially when you know how to dig up information that people prefer to keep buried. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email with several attachments. Photos of Mason's corporate credit card statements, hotel receipts, and restaurant bills. All time-stamped during business hours, all charged to company accounts, all featuring expenses that would make the TechNova board very uncomfortable. But the real prize was the final attachment. Security footage from the Marriott downtown, showing Mason and Kiera entering a room together last Tuesday afternoon. I forwarded the entire package to 3 email addresses: the TechNova Board of Directors, the Austin Business Journal, and Linda Reddan, Mason's wife of 22 years. Then I walked back to the parking garage. Mason's silver BMW sat in its reserved spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I pulled out my pocket knife and methodically punctured all 4 tires. Not slashing them dramatically, just small holes that would leave him stranded but wouldn't trigger any security alarms. I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Try riding on these, lover boy." 20 minutes later, I was back at the gala, sitting at our table like nothing had happened. Kiera shot me a suspicious look. "Feel better?" she asked. "Much," I replied. "Sometimes you just need to clear your head." Mason was in the middle of another speech when his phone started buzzing. Then Kiera's phone lit up. Then several other phones around the room began chiming with notifications. I watched Mason's face change as he read whatever message had just arrived. His practiced smile cracked, and sweat began beading on his forehead. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice slightly strained, "I'm afraid I need to step away for a moment." But before he could leave the stage, Linda Reddan appeared at the ballroom entrance. Even from across the room, I could see she was furious. She marched straight toward the stage, her phone held high. "Mason Reddan," she called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Would you like to explain these photos to everyone?" The crowd turned to stare. Mason's face went pale. Kiera grabbed my arm. "What's happening?" "I think your work husband is about to become unemployed," I said. Security moved to escort Linda out, but she'd already accomplished her goal. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You want dirt? Check your email." I opened the message and nearly laughed out loud. It was from Zara Meller, and attached was a photo that made the hotel footage look tame. Kiera and Mason in his office, her sitting on his desk, his hands places they definitely shouldn't be during business hours. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 days ago. I forwarded the image to the same distribution list, then sat back to watch the chaos unfold. Mason had disappeared from the stage. Kiera was frantically texting someone. Sandra looked confused, and several TechNova executives were huddled in heated conversation near the exit. "I think we should leave," Kiera said, standing abruptly. "Why?" I asked innocently. "The party's just getting started." But she was already grabbing her purse and heading for the door. I followed at a leisurely pace, savoring every moment of her panic. In the parking garage, we found Mason standing next to his BMW, staring at his flat tires in disbelief. "Car trouble?" I called out. He spun around, his eyes wild. "You. This was you." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said. "But maybe you should call someone. Looks like you're going to need a ride." Kiera stepped between us. "Keaton, what did you do?" "Me? I've been sitting in that ballroom all evening, watching my wife's boss humiliate me in front of half of Austin's business community." "What exactly do you think I did?" Mason pulled out his phone and dialed what I assumed was security. "This is Mason Reddan. I need someone in the parking garage immediately. I'm being threatened." "Threatened?" I laughed. "Mason, I haven't even raised my voice. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." But security was already on their way. 2 guards appeared within minutes, along with Harris, the head of hotel security. "What seems to be the problem?" Harris asked. Mason pointed at me. "This man vandalized my car and has been harassing me." Harris examined the tires, then looked at me. "Sir, do you know anything about this?" "I've been at the gala all evening," I said. "You can check the security footage." Which was true. I'd been very careful about camera angles. "I want him arrested," Mason demanded. But Harris was already shaking his head. "Sir, without evidence, there's not much we can do. I suggest you call your insurance company." Mason's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. I know it was him." "Knowing and proving are 2 different things," I said. "Maybe you should focus on your other problems." As if on cue, his phone started ringing. The caller ID showed TechNova board. Mason stared at the phone like it was a snake. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked. He declined the call, but it immediately started ringing again. Kiera grabbed my arm. "We're leaving, now." As we walked to our car, I heard Mason's phone ringing for the 3rd time. Behind us, he was shouting at the security guards, demanding they detain me. "You're making a mistake," he called after us. "This isn't over." I turned back and smiled. "You're absolutely right, Mason. This is just the beginning." Time to remind them who I used to be. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Kiera slamming doors throughout our house. She'd been on her phone since 6 a.m., her voice growing more frantic with each conversation. "No, I don't know what happened," she was saying as I walked into the kitchen. "Someone sent fabricated documents to the board." Fabricated. That was rich. I poured myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, opening my laptop. The Austin Business Journal's website had already posted a story. TechNova CEO under investigation for misuse of company funds. The article was thorough, detailing Mason's creative use of the corporate credit card for personal entertainment. They'd even included quotes from an anonymous board member expressing serious concerns about executive accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen. "Nice work. The dominoes are falling." Kiera ended her call and turned to face me. "Did you leak those documents?" "What documents?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Don't play dumb, Keaton. The credit card statements, the hotel receipts. Someone sent them to the board, and I know it was you." I finally met her eyes. "How would I have access to Mason's financial records?" "You're a cybersecurity consultant. You know how to hack into systems." "Hacking is illegal, Kiera. I would never do anything illegal." Which was technically true. I hadn't hacked anything. I'd simply used Mason's own vanity against him. 3 months ago, when my physical therapy was at its most intensive, Mason had started visiting our house regularly, ostensibly to check on me, but really to spend time with Kiera. During one of these visits, he'd bragged about his new corporate consulting contract with a company called Elite Business Solutions. What Mason didn't know was that Elite Business Solutions was a shell company I'd created years ago for legitimate consulting work. When he'd submitted his fake invoices to justify personal expenses, he'd unknowingly given me complete access to his spending patterns. Every hotel room, every expensive dinner, every suspicious transaction had been documented and cross-referenced with his calendar and Kiera's schedule. The pattern was unmistakable. The board suspended him, Kiera said, her voice hollow, pending a full investigation. That seems reasonable, I replied. Companies have to protect themselves from liability. She stared at me for a long moment. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying my coffee. Would you like some? My phone rang. The caller ID showed Linda Reddan. Hello, Linda, I answered, putting the call on speaker. Keaton. Her voice was crisp and professional. I wanted to thank you for opening my eyes. Kiera's face went white. I'm not sure what you mean, I said. The photos, the documentation, 22 years of marriage, and I never suspected. My lawyer says I have grounds for a very favorable divorce settlement. I'm sorry you're going through this, Linda. Don't be sorry, be proud. You did what I should have done months ago. After she hung up, Kiera sank into a chair across from me. How long have you known? She asked. About what? About Mason and me. I set down my coffee cup. I've suspected for about 4 months. I've had proof for 3. Why didn't you say anything? What was I supposed to say? Honey, I know you're having an affair with your boss. Could you please pass the salt? She had the decency to look ashamed. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did happen, repeatedly. In his office, in hotel rooms, in our guest bedroom while I was at physical therapy. Her eyes widened. How do you know about the guest bedroom? I pulled out my phone and showed her the security app. I installed cameras 6 months ago after my surgery, for home security. Imagine my surprise when I reviewed the footage. The color drained from her face completely. You recorded us? I recorded someone breaking into my house and using my furniture. The fact that it was my wife and her boss was just an unfortunate detail. Kiera stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm calling my lawyer. Good idea. You're going to need one. She stormed out of the kitchen, her phone already pressed to her ear. I finished my coffee and checked my email. 3 new messages had arrived overnight, all from journalists wanting to interview me about Mason's suspension. I deleted them without responding. My real prize was a message from Harris, the hotel security chief. He'd attached the parking garage footage from last night, showing Mason's increasingly erratic behavior after discovering his flat tires. But more interesting was what the footage didn't show, me anywhere near his car. I'd been very careful about that. At 2 p.m., I drove to TechNova's headquarters. The parking lot was buzzing with activity. News vans lined the street, and reporters were interviewing anyone willing to talk. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Mason emerged from the building, flanked by 2 security guards. His usual confident stride had been replaced by a hurried shuffle, and he kept his head down to avoid the cameras. I followed his car at a safe distance as he drove to his house in Westlake Hills. The mansion sat on 2 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, with a circular driveway and a 3-car garage. I parked down the street and waited again. At 4:30, a moving truck arrived. Linda was already implementing her lawyer's advice, securing assets before Mason could hide them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Mozart's Coffee, 1 hour, come alone. Zed Zara Meller, the HR manager who'd been so helpful last night. Mozart's Coffee sat on the shore of Lake Austin, its outdoor deck offering a perfect view of the water. I found Zara at a corner table, nursing an iced latte and looking nervous. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. Thank you for the photos. They were very helpful. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I have more. I'm listening. Mason's been running a side business through the company, consulting contracts that don't exist, vendor payments to fake companies. I've been tracking it for months. Why haven't you reported it? Because Kiera was helping him cover it up. She processed the invoices, approved the payments. If I'd gone to the board, she would have destroyed the evidence and claimed I was lying. Interesting. But now that she's suspended, now I have access to her files, and her computer password is pathetically easy to guess. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on there. Bank records, forged signatures, email chains discussing how to hide the money. I pocketed the drive. What do you want in return? Kiera's job and Mason's complete destruction. That seems fair. We shook hands, and she left without another word. Back at home, I found Kiera packing suitcases in our bedroom. Going somewhere? I asked. I'm staying at Sandra's until this gets sorted out. Running away won't make it go away. She turned to face me, her eyes red from crying. What do you want, Keaton? Money? The house? Just tell me what it will take for you to stop this. I want you to understand what you've done. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You made hundreds of mistakes, Kiera. Every lie, every secret meeting, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to be my wife while you were planning your next rendezvous with Mason. She sat down on the edge of the bed. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, and now I'm going to hurt you back. Is that what this is about? Revenge? I considered the question seriously. No, this is about justice. You and Mason thought you were smarter than everyone else. You thought you could humiliate me publicly and face no consequences. You were wrong. She zipped up her suitcase and headed for the door. This isn't over. You're absolutely right, I said. We're just getting started. After she left, I uploaded Zara's files to a secure server and began analyzing the data. The scope of Mason and Kiera's embezzlement was staggering. Over 18 months, they'd stolen nearly $200,000 from TechNova. But the real treasure was their email correspondence, discussing how to frame other employees for the missing money if they were ever caught. I spent the evening crafting a comprehensive report, complete with financial analysis and timeline documentation. Then I sent copies to the TechNova board, the Austin Police Department's white-collar crime division, and 3 different news outlets. By morning, Mason Reddan would be facing criminal charges, and Kiera would be right there beside him. I woke up to my phone ringing at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed Detective Patricia Walsh from the Austin Police Department. Mr. Merren, this is Detective Walsh. We need to speak with you about some documents you sent to our department. Of course, Detective. When would be convenient? This morning, if possible. Can you come to the station at 9? I'll be there. After hanging up, I checked the news websites. The story had exploded overnight. TechNova executives charged with embezzlement was the headline across multiple outlets. The articles detailed the sophisticated scheme Mason and Kiera had orchestrated, complete with quotes from the police and the company's board of directors. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen. Holy hell, man, you don't mess around. Another text arrived from Sandra. What did you do to my sister? I ignored both messages and got dressed for my meeting with the police. The Austin Police Department's downtown station was buzzing with activity. Detective Walsh turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen every type of criminal Austin had to offer. Mr. Merren, she said, leading me to an interview room. Thank you for coming in. I want to discuss the evidence you provided regarding the TechNova embezzlement case. Happy to help however I can. She opened a file folder and spread several documents across the table. These financial records are very detailed. How did you obtain them? I'd prepared for this question. My wife works for TechNova. Worked, I should say. She often brought work home, and I have a background in financial analysis. When I noticed discrepancies in some documents she'd left on our home printer, I became concerned. Concerned enough to investigate further? Concerned enough to document what I was seeing. When the pattern became clear, I felt obligated to report it. Detective Walsh nodded. The evidence you provided is comprehensive, almost too comprehensive. I'm thorough by nature. I'm sure you are. Can you tell me about your relationship with your wife? Here we go. We're separated. She moved out yesterday. Was this separation related to the embezzlement? It was related to her affair with Mason Reddan. Walsh made a note. How long were you aware of the affair? Several months. I documented it as well. I pulled out my phone and showed her the security footage from our house. She watched for about 30 seconds before handing the phone back. That must have been difficult to discover. It was educational. She studied me for a moment. Mr. Merren, I want to be clear about something. While we appreciate citizens reporting crimes, we don't appreciate vigilante justice. If you've done anything illegal in gathering this evidence... Detective, I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I understand the legal boundaries better than most people. Everything I provided was obtained legally. Good, because Mason Reddan's lawyer is claiming his client is being framed by a vengeful husband. I laughed. Mason Reddan's lawyer is going to have a hard time explaining away $200,000 in fraudulent transactions, but he's welcome to try. The interview continued for another hour, covering every detail of how I discovered and documented the embezzlement. By the end, Detective Walsh seemed satisfied that I'd acted within the law. We'll be in touch if we need anything else, she said, walking me to the exit. Detective, can I ask you something? Sure. How long do cases like this typically take to prosecute? She smiled grimly. With evidence this solid, not long. I'd expect arrests within the week. Perfect. From the police station, I drove to a coffee shop near TechNova's headquarters and waited. At 11:30, Zara Meller appeared, looking significantly more confident than she had yesterday. How did it go with the police? She asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Very well. They seemed impressed with the quality of the evidence. Good, because I have an update. The board fired Mason this morning, effective immediately with cause. No severance, no benefits, no golden parachute. And Kiera? Also terminated. They're considering whether to file a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen money. I sipped my coffee. What about you? Interim VP of Operations, pending a formal review process, which is corporate speak for, the job is mine if I don't screw it up. Congratulations. She leaned forward. There's something else. Mason tried to throw Kiera under the bus. He told the board she was the mastermind, that he was just following her instructions. That was interesting. How did the board respond? They have the email evidence. They know he's lying, but it shows you what kind of man he really is. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. We need to talk. Meet me at Sandra's house at 2 p.m. I showed the message to Zara. Looks like the other shoe is about to drop. Be careful. Desperate people do unpredictable things. I drove home first to prepare for the confrontation. In my home office, I printed copies of every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The financial records, the security footage, the email chains, the hotel receipts, everything that documented Kiera and Mason's betrayal. Then I loaded the files onto my laptop and headed to Sandra's house. Sandra lived in a trendy neighborhood east of downtown, in a renovated bungalow that screamed millennial with too much student loan debt. Her car was in the driveway, along with Kiera's BMW. I knocked on the front door and waited. Sandra answered, her face a mask of barely controlled anger. You destroyed her life. She destroyed her own life. I just documented it. Come in, Kiera called from the living room. Let's get this over with. I found her sitting on Sandra's couch, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. Sit down, she said. I remained standing. I'm comfortable here. Fine. I want to know what it's going to take for you to stop this campaign against me. Campaign? Kiera, I reported crimes to the appropriate authorities. That's called being a responsible citizen. Sandra stepped between us. Don't act innocent, Keaton. You planned this whole thing. You're right. I planned to catch my wife stealing money and having an affair. It took months of careful documentation, but I succeeded. Kiera stood up abruptly. I made mistakes. I admit that. But destroying my career, my reputation, my entire future, that's not justice. That's revenge. What did you think would happen? I asked. Did you think you could embezzle money from your employer and face no consequences? Did you think you could humiliate me publicly and I'd just accept it? I thought you loved me enough to forgive me. The audacity was breathtaking. Forgive you for what exactly? The affair, the theft, the lies, or the fact that you were planning to divorce me and take half my assets while continuing to steal from your company? Her face went pale. How do you know about the divorce papers? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of the documents I'd found in her car. You left them on your passenger seat last week, along with your notes about hiding assets from the settlement. Sandra grabbed the phone and stared at the screen. Kiera, you told me he was abusive. You said you were afraid of him. I never said he was abusive, Kiera snapped. You absolutely did. You said he threatened Mason at the gala. I laughed. The only thing I threatened Mason with was the truth. Apparently that was enough. My phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Mason Reddan. Should I answer it? I asked. No, Kiera said quickly. I answered anyway, putting the call on speaker. You piece of garbage. Mason's voice filled the room. You think you're so smart, don't you? Hello, Mason. How's unemployment treating you? This isn't over. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'm going to destroy you. With what? The truth? Good luck with that strategy. I know people, Keaton. People who can make your life very difficult. Sandra was staring at the phone in horror. This wasn't the smooth, charismatic executive she'd met at company parties. Are you threatening me, Mason? I asked. I'm promising you. You want to play games? Let's play games. I look forward to it. But maybe you should focus on more pressing concerns, like your criminal trial. The line went silent for a moment. What trial? The one for embezzlement. The police arrested you about an hour ago, or they will very shortly. I could hear him breathing heavily. You're lying. Check the news, Mason. Or better yet, check your driveway. I think you'll find some visitors waiting for you. He hung up without another word. Kiera was staring at me with something approaching awe. You really did plan this whole thing. Every detail. Why? Why go to all this trouble instead of just divorcing me? I considered the question seriously. Because divorce would have been private. This way everyone knows exactly who you are. Sandra's phone started buzzing with notifications. She looked at the screen and gasped. What is it? Kiera asked. The arrest. It's all over social media. Someone filmed Mason being taken away in handcuffs. She held up her phone, showing a video of Mason Reddan being led from his house by 2 police officers. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and his face was a mask of rage and humiliation. The video had already been shared hundreds of times. Kiera sank back onto the couch. This is really happening. This is just the beginning, I said. Wait until the trial starts. Wait until all the evidence becomes public record. Wait until every detail of your affair and your theft is broadcast on the evening news. You're enjoying this, Sandra said. I'm satisfied with it. There's a difference. I headed for the door. Ladies, this has been educational, but I have things to do. What things? Kiera called after me. I turned back and smiled. I'm thinking about redecorating the house. Maybe turn your office into a home gym. What do you think? As I walked to my car, I could hear them arguing through the open window. Sandra was demanding to know what else Kiera had lied about, and Kiera was trying to explain that everything had gotten out of control. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen. Saw the news, Mason's been arrested. How does it feel to win? I typed back, ask me tomorrow, this is just round 1. Because I wasn't done with Mason Reddan, not even close. The next morning brought a delicious surprise. I woke up to find a news van parked across from my house, and my phone ringing with calls from reporters wanting my side of the story. I ignored the calls and made coffee, watching through my kitchen window as more media arrived. By 8 a.m., there were 3 news trucks and at least a dozen reporters setting up on the sidewalk. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. Media circus at your house. You might want to lay low for a few days. Another text from Owen. Turn on Channel 7. You're famous. I switched on the television and found myself watching live coverage from my own front yard. The reporter was a polished blonde woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. This is the home of Kiera Merren, the cybersecurity consultant whose evidence led to yesterday's arrest of TechNova executive Mason Reddan, she was saying. Merren's estranged wife, Kiera Merren, was also terminated from the company and may face criminal charges herself. The story cut to footage of Mason's arrest, then to file photos of him and Kiera at various corporate events. They looked happy and successful in the pictures, which made their current situation even more dramatic. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see it was the blonde reporter from Channel 7. I opened the door just wide enough to speak to her. Mr. Merren, I'm Jennifer Hayes from Channel 7 News. Could I have a few minutes of your time? I'm not giving interviews, I said. Just a quick statement about how you discovered the embezzlement? No comment. What about your wife's affair with Mason Reddan? How did that make you feel? I almost laughed. How did it make me feel? It made me feel like documenting everything and calling the police. She brightened, thinking she had a quote. So this was about revenge? This was about justice. Have a nice day. I closed the door and went back to my coffee. My phone rang again. This time it was Linda Reddan. Keaton, I wanted to thank you again. Mason was arrested at our house yesterday in front of our children. It was horrible, but necessary. I'm sorry your kids had to see that. They needed to see who their father really is. My lawyer says the divorce will be finalized within 60 days, and I'll get everything. The house, the cars, his retirement accounts, everything. That seems fair? There's something else. Mason's been calling me, begging me to take him back. He says you framed him, that none of this is real. What did you tell him? I told him I've seen the evidence. I know what he did, and I told him that if he contacts me again, I'll file a restraining order. After Linda hung up, I decided to venture out despite the media presence. I had errands to run, and I wasn't going to hide in my house like a criminal. The reporters swarmed me as soon as I opened my front door. Mr. Merren, how long did you plan this investigation? Sir, do you feel vindicated by the arrests? What's your message for other betrayed spouses? I stopped at the end of my driveway and faced the cameras. I have one statement, I said. When people break the law, they face consequences. When people betray trust, they face consequences. That's how society works. Are you satisfied with the outcome? Jennifer Hayes called out. I'm satisfied that the truth came out. Everything else is up to the courts. I got in my car and drove away, leaving the media to dissect my words. My first stop was the bank, where I needed to freeze our joint accounts and protect my assets from any legal fallout. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd handled our accounts for years, looked uncomfortable when I walked in. Mr. Merren, I saw the news. I'm so sorry about everything you're going through. Thank you, Patricia. I need to restructure our accounts. Of course. What did you have in mind? I'd prepared for this conversation with my lawyer. Within an hour, I'd moved my money into individual accounts that Kiera couldn't touch, and I'd documented every transaction for the inevitable divorce proceedings. From the bank, I drove to TechNova's headquarters. The parking lot was still crawling with reporters, but I wasn't there to see them. I was there to see Harris, the security chief who'd been so helpful at the hotel. I found him in his office, reviewing security footage on multiple monitors. Mr. Merren, he said, looking up. I wondered when you'd show up. I wanted to thank you for your professionalism the other night. He leaned back in his chair. You know, I've been in security for 20 years. I've seen a lot of corporate misconduct, but what Mason and your wife did was particularly brazen. How so? They used company resources for personal business, they stole money, and they thought they were untouchable because of their positions. Mason, especially. He treated the support staff like servants. Harris pulled up a video file on his computer. Want to see something interesting? The footage showed Mason in his office, screaming at a cleaning woman who'd apparently moved some papers on his desk. His face was red with rage, and he was gesturing wildly. This was last month, Harris said. The woman quit the next day, said she'd never been treated so badly in her life. Why are you showing me this? Because Mason Reddan is getting exactly what he deserves. And frankly, so is your wife. She knew what kind of man he was, and she chose him anyway. I left TechNova feeling even more vindicated than before. These weren't just adulterers, they were genuinely awful people who'd been enabled by their corporate positions. My phone buzzed with a text from Zara. Emergency. Meet me at Mozart's Coffee, now. I found her at the same corner table we'd used before, but this time she looked panicked. What's wrong? I asked. Mason made bail this morning, and he's not taking his arrest well. Define not well. He showed up at the office an hour ago, demanding to see his files. Security had to escort him out, but not before he made some threats. What kind of threats? She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. This isn't over. I know where you live, and I know where Keaton lives. Everyone who betrayed me will pay. Have you called the police? They said they'd look into it, but he hasn't technically done anything illegal yet. I studied the message. Mason was unraveling, which made him dangerous, but also predictable. What else did he say at the office? He blamed everyone but himself. Said you hacked into his accounts, said I fabricated evidence, said Kiera was innocent and he was protecting her. Protecting her from what? From you, apparently. He told security that you're dangerous, that you've been stalking him and planning this for months. Which was partially true, but not in the way Mason meant it. Zara, I want you to be careful. Mason's desperate, and desperate people make poor decisions. What about you? He knows where you live. Let him come. I'm ready for him. That evening, I prepared my house for Mason's inevitable visit. I checked the security cameras, tested the motion sensors, and made sure all the doors and windows were properly locked. Then I called Owen. I might need backup tonight, I told him. What's happening? Mason Reddan is having a breakdown, and I think he's going to do something stupid. Want me to come over? Not yet, but be ready. At 9 p.m., my security system chimed. The front gate camera showed a figure in dark clothing trying to climb over the fence. The infrared system identified him immediately, Mason Reddan. I watched on my monitors as he stumbled through my front yard, clearly intoxicated. He was carrying what looked like a baseball bat. Instead of calling the police immediately, I decided to let him make his move. I wanted this confrontation on camera, with clear evidence of who the aggressor was. Mason reached my front door and began pounding on it with his fist. Keaton, he shouted. Come out here, you coward. I activated the intercom system. Hello, Mason. You're trespassing on private property. I want to talk to you. Then make an appointment. Through your lawyer. He swung the bat at my front window, but the impact-resistant glass didn't break. The blow left a spiderweb of cracks, but the window held. You destroyed my life, he screamed. You destroyed your own life. I just documented it. He swung the bat again, this time at my door. The solid wood absorbed the impact with a satisfying thud. I'm calling the police, Mason. I suggest you leave. Call them. I don't care anymore. You took everything from me. I didn't take anything. You gave it away when you decided to steal money and sleep with my wife. He stumbled backward, nearly falling over my landscaping. The alcohol was clearly affecting his coordination. She loves me, he said, his voice breaking. Kiera loves me, not you. If she loves you so much, where is she tonight? Why are you here alone, drunk, swinging a bat at my house? That seemed to hit home. Mason's shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked more pathetic than threatening. Then his phone rang. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see his face change as he listened. Whatever the caller was telling him, it wasn't good news. He hung up and looked directly at the camera above my door. This isn't over, he said, his voice quiet. You think you won, but you have no idea what's coming. He walked back toward the fence, leaving the bat on my front porch. I waited until he was gone, then called Detective Walsh. Mason Reddan just tried to break into my house, I reported. I have it all on video. We'll send a unit to pick him up. Are you injured? No, but he damaged my property and made threats. We'll add those to his charges. After hanging up, I reviewed the security footage. Mason's breakdown was complete and utterly damaging. His lawyer would have a hard time explaining away a drunken home invasion attempt. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. I heard about Mason. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine. Your boyfriend is going back to jail. He's not my boyfriend anymore. Smart choice. A little late, but smart. Can we talk tomorrow? I want to discuss the divorce terms. Have your lawyer call my lawyer. Keaton, please. Can't we handle this like adults? I considered her request. Adults don't embezzle money from their employers. Adults don't have affairs with their bosses. Adults don't lie to their spouses for months while planning to steal their assets. I know I made mistakes. You made choices, Kiera. Now you get to live with the consequences. I turned off my phone and poured myself a whiskey. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was content to watch the security footage of Mason Reddan's complete meltdown. The war was escalating, and I was winning every battle. 3 weeks later, I woke up to find my front yard free of news vans for the first time since Mason's arrest. The media had moved on to other stories, but the legal proceedings were just beginning. I checked my email over coffee and found a message from Detective Walsh. Mason Reddan pled guilty to embezzlement and criminal trespass. Sentencing next month. Thought you'd want to know. A separate email from my divorce lawyer contained better news. Kiera's attorney wants to negotiate. She's in a weak position and knows it. My phone rang. It was Linda Reddan. Keaton, I have news. The divorce was finalized yesterday. I got everything. Congratulations. Mason has to sell his cars to pay his legal fees. His lawyer dropped him when he couldn't pay the retainer, and the civil lawsuit from TechNova is moving forward. How's he taking it? Badly. He's been calling me from jail, crying and begging. It's pathetic. After Linda hung up, I drove to my lawyer's office to discuss Kiera's settlement offer. David Martinez had been handling my legal affairs for years, and he'd navigated the divorce proceedings with surgical precision. She wants 50% of your assets, he said, sliding a document across his desk. Plus alimony for 5 years. I laughed. Based on what legal theory? Community property. She's claiming she contributed equally to the marriage. By stealing money and having an affair? Her lawyer is arguing that the affair was a personal matter separate from the financial aspects of the divorce. I pulled out my phone and showed David the security footage of Kiera and Mason in our guest bedroom. Personal matter? I said. She brought him into our house, into our bed. She used our home as a location for her affair while planning to divorce me and take half my money. David nodded. The adultery definitely strengthens your position. But Texas is a no-fault divorce state. The affair itself doesn't automatically disqualify her from community property. What about the embezzlement? That's more complicated. The money she stole was from her employer, not from you directly, but it does speak to her character and judgment. I leaned back in my chair. What do you recommend? Counteroffer. 20% of assets, no alimony, and she assumes responsibility for her legal debts from the criminal case. Make it 15%. Keaton, be reasonable. Even with everything she's done, she was married to you for 8 years. 8 years of lies, apparently. 15%, David. That's my final offer. He made a note on the file. I'll present it to her attorney. From the lawyer's office, I drove to Mozart's Coffee for my weekly meeting with Zara. She'd been promoted to permanent VP of operations and was overseeing TechNova's recovery from the embezzlement scandal. How's the civil lawsuit progressing? I asked. Excellent. Our lawyers estimate we'll recover about 60% of the stolen money. Mason's assets are being liquidated, and Kiera's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced judgment. Cooperate how? She's providing testimony about Mason's role in the scheme. Apparently, she's decided to save herself by throwing him under the bus. The irony was delicious. Mason had tried to blame Kiera for the embezzlement, and now she was returning the favor. There's something else, Zara said. The board wants to offer you a consulting contract, corporate security review, with a focus on preventing future embezzlement. I'm interested. What's the scope? 6 months, full access to all financial systems and personnel files. Basically, you'd be auditing everything Mason and Kiera had access to. It was perfect. Not only would I be paid well for the work, but I'd have legitimate access to any remaining evidence of their crimes. Send me the contract details. That evening, I was reviewing TechNova's preliminary audit materials when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sandra standing on my porch, looking nervous. I opened the door. Sandra, this is unexpected. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. I led her to the living room and offered her coffee, which she declined. I owe you an apology, she said. I believed Kiera when she said you were the problem. I thought you were being vindictive and cruel. And now? Now I know the truth. She lied to me about everything. The affair, the money, the divorce plans, everything. I waited for her to continue. She's broke, Keaton. The legal fees, the civil judgment, the restitution. She's living in my guest room because she can't afford her own place. That's unfortunate. She asked me to talk to you, to see if you'd be willing to increase the divorce settlement. I almost laughed. From 15% to what? She was hoping for 30%. Sandra, your sister stole money from her employer and had an affair with her boss. She humiliated me publicly and planned to take half my assets while continuing her criminal activity. Why exactly should I give her more money? Because she's family, because she's desperate. She made her choices. These are the consequences. Sandra stood up to leave. I had to try. I understand, but the answer is no. After she left, I called David Martinez. Kiera's sister just visited me, I said. They're getting desperate. Good. Desperation leads to acceptance. I think they'll take the 15%. What's our timeline? I can have the papers ready by next week. Once she signs, you'll be officially divorced and free to move on with your life. Move on. The phrase had an interesting ring to it. Over the next few days, I began planning my post-divorce life. The house felt too big for one person, and it held too many memories of Kiera's betrayal. I started looking at condos downtown, places with better security, and no guest bedrooms for unfaithful wives to defile. My phone rang while I was reviewing real estate listings. It was Detective Walsh. Keaton, I have an update on Mason Reddan. He was sentenced this morning. 18 months in state prison plus restitution. What about Kiera? Plea bargain. 6 months probation, community service, and full restitution. The prosecutor felt her cooperation was valuable. So Mason would go to prison while Kiera walked free. It seemed unfair, but I'd learned that fairness and justice weren't always the same thing. There's something else, Detective Walsh continued. Mason's lawyer filed an appeal, claiming his client was entrapped by a vengeful spouse. It's a long shot, but you should be aware. Let him appeal. The evidence speaks for itself. That's what the prosecutor said. The case is solid. That afternoon, David Martinez called with news. She signed, he said. 15%, no alimony, assumes her own legal debts. The divorce is final. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. After 8 years of marriage and months of legal warfare, it was over. Congratulations, David said. You're officially a free man. Thank you for everything, David. My pleasure. It was one of the most satisfying cases I've ever handled. I hung up and poured myself a whiskey to celebrate, or maybe to mourn. I wasn't sure which emotion was stronger. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I hope you learned something from this experience. I did. I learned that actions have consequences. That's a start. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, Kiera. I might forgive you someday, but I'll never forget what you did. I understand. Good luck with your new life. You too, Keaton. You deserve to be happy. I turned off my phone and finished my whiskey. Tomorrow I would start looking for that downtown condo. Tomorrow I would begin the TechNova consulting contract. Tomorrow I would start building a life without Kiera Merren in it. But tonight, I was content to sit in my living room and reflect on the most successful campaign of revenge I'd ever orchestrated. Mason Reddan was in prison, his reputation destroyed, and his assets seized. Kiera was broke, unemployed, and living with her sister. Their affair had cost them everything. Meanwhile, I was free, financially secure, and professionally vindicated. Justice, it turned out, was even sweeter than I'd imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was settling into my new downtown condo when my phone rang with a call that would provide the perfect ending to my campaign against Mason and Kiera. Mr. Merren, this is James Patterson from Channel 7 News. We're doing a follow-up story on the TechNova embezzlement case, and we'd like to interview you. I'd turned down dozens of interview requests over the past year, but something about this one intrigued me. What's the angle? I asked. Mason Reddan is being released from prison next week. We want to do a Where Are They Now piece about all the people involved in the case. Perfect timing. I might be interested. What did you have in mind? A sit-down interview at your home, discussing how you uncovered the embezzlement and how it's affected your life. When? Next Friday evening. We'd like to broadcast it on the anniversary of Reddan's arrest. I agreed to the interview, then spent the week preparing. This would be my chance to tell the complete story, to explain exactly how I'd brought down two people who thought they were untouchable. The interview took place in my condo's living room, with Austin's skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. James Patterson was a seasoned journalist who asked intelligent questions and let me tell the story in my own words. Take me back to the beginning, he said. When did you first suspect your wife was having an affair? About a year ago, I replied. She started working late more often, taking calls in private, being secretive about her phone. The classic signs. But you didn't confront her immediately. No, I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I'm trained to gather evidence before making accusations, so I started documenting everything, including installing security cameras in your own home. That was for general security purposes, but yes, they captured evidence of the affair. Patterson leaned forward. Some people might say what you did was vindictive, that you could have simply divorced your wife without destroying her career. I'd prepared for this question. James, my wife and her boss weren't just having an affair. They were stealing money from their employer. They were defrauding shareholders, cheating taxpayers, and planning to frame innocent coworkers if they got caught. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. But you admit you planned this campaign carefully. I documented crimes carefully. There's a difference. The interview continued for an hour, covering every aspect of the case. Patterson asked about Mason's breakdown, Kiera's cooperation with prosecutors, and my current relationship with both of them. Do you ever regret how this all played out? He asked. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my wife chose to betray our marriage and steal money from her employer. But I don't regret exposing the truth. What's your message for other people who find themselves in similar situations? I looked directly into the camera. Document everything, trust but verify, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve to be betrayed. The interview aired the following Friday, exactly 1 year after Mason's arrest. I watched it at home with Owen, who'd become my closest friend during the divorce proceedings. You came across well, he said. Professional, reasonable, justified. That's because I was professional, reasonable, and justified. My phone started ringing almost immediately after the broadcast ended. The first call was from Zara. Excellent interview, she said. You made it clear that this was about corporate crime, not personal revenge. Because it was about corporate crime. The board was pleased with how you represented the situation. It validates their decision to hire you as a consultant. The next call was from Linda Reddan. I saw the interview, she said. Thank you for not making it about the personal aspects. My children didn't need to hear details about their father's affair. How are the kids handling everything? Better than expected. They understand that their father made bad choices and had to face consequences. It's been a valuable lesson for them. The third call surprised me. It was Sandra. Keaton, I watched the interview. I wanted to call and say, I think you did the right thing. That's quite a change from a year ago. A year ago, I didn't know the whole truth. Kiera told me you were being cruel and vindictive. But watching that interview, seeing how you explained everything, I understand now. How is she doing? She got a job at a small accounting firm. Entry level, nothing like what she had before, but it's honest work. She's trying to rebuild her life. I'm glad to hear that. She watched the interview, too. She said she finally understands why you did what you did. After Sandra hung up, I poured myself a whiskey and stepped onto my balcony. Downtown Austin stretched out below me, the lights of the city reflecting off the Colorado River. It was a beautiful view, and it was mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your interview. You destroyed my life, but I deserved it. I hope you find happiness. M. Mason, texting from whatever cheap apartment he was living in after his release from prison. I deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived, this one from Kiera. Watched the interview. You were fair and honest. Thank you for not making it personal. I hope someday we can both move past this. I considered responding, then decided against it. Some chapters needed to close completely. Owen joined me on the balcony, bringing his own drink. So what's next? He asked. What do you mean? You've won. Completely and totally. Mason's in disgrace, Kiera's starting over from nothing, and you're successful and free. What do you do for an encore? I thought about the question. I think I just live my life. Date someone new, maybe. Travel, focus on work, normal things. No more campaigns of justice? I hope not. One was enough. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below us. In the distance, I could see the TechNova building where this whole story had started. The company had recovered from the embezzlement scandal and was thriving under new leadership. My phone rang one more time. The caller ID showed Detective Walsh. Keaton, I saw your interview. Well done. You came across as the victim you were, not the vigilante Mason's lawyer tried to paint you as. Thank you, Detective. I wanted to let you know that Mason's appeal was denied. The conviction stands, and the case is officially closed. Good to know. You know, in 20 years of police work, I've seen a lot of people get away with crimes because no one was willing to document the evidence and come forward. What you did took courage. After she hung up, I realized that Detective Walsh was right. It had taken courage to document my wife's betrayal, to gather evidence of their crimes, to endure the public scrutiny and media attention. But it had been worth it. Mason Reddan had lost everything. His career, his family, his freedom, his reputation. He would spend the rest of his life known as the executive who went to prison for embezzlement. Kiera had lost almost as much. Her career, her marriage, her financial security, her social standing. She was starting over at 35 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a criminal record. Meanwhile, I had emerged stronger, wealthier, and completely vindicated. The TechNova consulting contract had led to other opportunities, and my reputation as someone who could uncover corporate fraud had made me one of the most sought-after cybersecurity consultants in Texas. I raised my glass to the Austin skyline and smiled. Here's to justice, I said aloud. Owen clinked his glass against mine. Here's to justice served cold. The coldest. As we finished our drinks, I reflected on the past year and the campaign that had consumed my life. Every move had been calculated, every piece of evidence carefully gathered and presented. I'd outmaneuvered two people who thought they were smarter than everyone else, and I'd done it without breaking a single law. The interview had been the perfect capstone to the story, allowing me to explain my actions to the world and demonstrate that sometimes, when the system works properly, justice really does prevail. My phone was finally quiet. No more calls from reporters, no more texts from the people whose lives I'd systematically dismantled. The story was over, and I had won completely. I went inside, poured one more whiskey, and sat down at my computer to review the financial reports for my latest consulting contract. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, I was content to savor the taste of perfect revenge, served exactly as cold as it deserved to be. The war was over, and I was the last man standing.